So, the other night my friends and I were drinking, and we stumbled into the realm of scary stories, and every single one of us had paranormal experiences, except this one friend, D. He doesn't really believe in the supernatural stuff, but he still told us this story that one of his friends that he knows since middle school told him. I'm going to tell this just like he did as well. So, my friend is an avid Tinder user. He goes on a lot of dates, and this one time he was chatting with a girl, very shy but cute and all. So they finally meet, and she's okay. They have a lot in common, and they have a really good time. However, this girl seems to be increasingly nervous as time goes by. Finally, they're about to say their goodbyes, and she says something along the lines of not wanting to go home. When my friend asks why, she replies it's because her new house is really scary, and being honest, she would be very grateful to get my friend to sleep over, just so that she could feel more at ease. But my friend thought, okay, we'll sleep, wink wink. She clarified soon enough, though, that she didn't want to have sex, and my friend was fine with that too. He drove them to the girl's house, and it's definitely kind of creepy. He feels a little uneasy, but not enough to prevent them from ending up fooling around, though they kept their clothes on. They slept on the same bed, and at some point of the night, my friend wakes up to go to the bathroom, which was a hallway away from the main bedroom. He goes, does his business, and when he comes out, he sees a dark figure just standing there in the dark. For a second, he thinks it's the girl, and he calls her name. The figure moves and starts walking on the opposite direction, and shit, that's definitely not the girl. He bolts to the bedroom at this point, scared to death, and his soul flies even farther from him when he sees the girl is not in bed. In fact, there's no trace of her anywhere. He looks up and down from the bathroom to the kitchen, and she isn't there, and nor did it seem like she ever was to begin with. He eventually got his things from the bedroom and just left the house as fast as he could, drove aimlessly for around 30 minutes until he could calm himself down, and then he just drove home. When he finished, we asked if the Tinder profile still existed after the girl mysteriously disappeared, and D says that he doesn't think so, but isn't certain. I'll fully admit that it seems kind of fictional, but D's friend swears by it, and at that moment, a little tipsy, it seemed pretty creepy for me. I have some more stories from that afternoon too, and maybe I'll share them as well if you'd like to hear them. But my friends are okay with me sharing their stories too, as long as I don't share anything too personal, like addresses and whatnot. Anyway, thanks for listening. Quite recently, I had a pretty strange experience with someone or something in the Walmart parking lot. I work during the day, and I really only have time to go shopping at night. Unfortunately, I get off around 10:30 every night, and by the time that I get home, it's already past 11. My boyfriend also works 12-hour shifts, so I prefer not to bother him with anything when we get off of work. So the other night, the Walmart parking lot was actually really full, so I had to park all the way in the back. The back of the vast parking lot is usually pretty deserted, but there are streetlights to keep things pretty visible. And while I was walking up to the Walmart front doors, I felt something had brushed my hair. Now, this is South Carolina in the summer, so I thought initially a bug had flown into my hair or something. However, I vigorously combed through it with my fingers. Admittedly, I hate bugs, but found nothing. I assumed that whatever had touched my hair did not get tangled in my thick curly locks and eventually just flew away, and so I felt it, but by the time I tried to get rid of it, it was gone. After picking up my groceries, I walked back to the car and did not have any problems. By the time that I got home, it was already 1 a.m. You know there aren't any open aisles at Walmart at night, so every checkout takes forever. My boyfriend was already asleep and the dogs were in the crate, so after I put my groceries up, I had some time to myself. I was watching some trash TV and eventually dozed off on the couch. I was only asleep for a few moments before I felt something touch my hair gently. It's really difficult for me to wake up immediately, so while I felt my hair move, I didn't immediately respond. I thought the sensation had stopped and was slowly falling back into a deep sleep, but as soon as I started to fade out again, something pulled my hair. I threw myself off the couch and looked around, but the bedroom door where my boyfriend and dogs were was still closed, and I could hear the faint sounds of him snoring. I checked the entire house, made sure all the doors were locked, and slept with my bedroom door locked as well that night. Every night before I go to bed, I brush my hair out now, and it's really thick and curly and really difficult to manage, and if I don't brush it and put oil in it, I'll wake up the next day completely matted down, so I brushed my hair out, put coconut leave-in and conditioner in it, and tied it up, and I went to sleep. But when I woke up the next morning, my hair tie was on the bed, and my hair was matted, only on one side. The left side where I swore that someone was pulling my hair the other night. I went to the bathroom and brushed out the matted side, and I felt this searing pain in my scalp. I couldn't really see anything in the mirror, but I took a picture with my phone, and my scalp was red with little specks of blood, and what looked like some sort of bruising. Today is day 4, and I haven't been able to relax since then, and I'm not sure if I'm going crazy or if something may have followed me home. I work in the pharmacy department of my local hospital. The hospital is one of the oldest in the country and has seen some horrors of the Troubles and conflict in Northern Ireland. This is a long and complicated history that isn't easily explained. Google has a lot of information about it if you're interested. This place has many stories too, but most of the staff who work there have a tale to tell of some form. I've been working in the hospital for 4 years now and have only just had my first experience, so here it goes. So each of the wards keep their own stock of medication, and it's part of my job to check their stock and order more if necessary. I was waiting for the lift outside Ward 4, currently a urology ward but formerly a children's ward, recently when I got overcome by curiosity looking into the old, abandoned ward opposite. The old ward opposite used to be a labour ward, but use of this ward was discontinued as a new part of the hospital was built and the labour ward moved into the new building. I walked into the old ward through the door, which is old and stiff. It remains open all the time and requires a decent amount of force to close. And when I walked past the door, I peeked further into one of the old rooms, which was filled with random junk. I was about to turn around when I heard a child's voice behind me. I couldn't make out what it was, but it sounded to me like a toddler or a young child who hadn't learned to speak properly yet. And then I turned quickly to the door slamming shut, hard, like someone had put all their might into closing it. These doors have windows in them, and I could see straight through it into the lift area, and there was definitely no one around. And to this day, I have no idea where that voice came from or who closed the door. I also spent the rest of the day trying to come up with a reasonable explanation, but I couldn't. So my family has a long history with living amongst Native Americans and their culture. My dad is half Native American, and my mum's side is just enthusiastic about the culture, which is kind of what led them to meeting in the first place. Anyways, my mum grew up selling crystals and jewelry in the southwest with her family. They were a large van and were a traveling shop that would basically buy out crystals and jewelry on reservations and then bring them to large cities and towns several miles away. FYI too, this wasn't exploitive. This was a deal that they had set up with several jewelers on the reservations. One night, they were driving along an Arizona desert road when the engine just overheated and stranded them miles from civilization. Before addressing the problem, my grandpa had to use the bathroom and walked over to a bush, and before he could do anything, he saw a pair of glowing red eyes, which, at the height they were standing at, he assumed it was a person. He begins to walk over and ask for help until he gets a better look at the thing, which made him run back to the car immediately. The thing was a lot taller than he had initially thought, standing at about 7 feet tall. It was covered in fur, almost like a werewolf, its face like a coyote's with human eyes. Funny enough too, almost looking like one of those animorph creatures from how my grandpa described it. But my mum and my grandparents were very well acquainted with Native American culture, and knew exactly what this was. It was a skinwalker. Now, up to this point, they'd only ever heard of them but had never seen one. My grandpa yells to my grandma to start up the van, and they drove as far as they could before the engine just overheated again. But after seeing this thing, their luck just became so bad that it was becoming hard to live. My grandparents actually split up for a little, and my grandma moved to Rome to star in a movie, as she was a decently known actress at the time. She took my two uncles and mum with her, and things were seemingly fine for a bit. Until one day, my mum and uncle, let's call him Steve, went out for a drive in their fancy, at the time, Mustang. They were driving all around Rome, and then they got to a highway that was pretty empty at the time. My uncle was going a little bit over the speed limit, 70 miles per hour if I'm remembering the story correctly, and then it happened. The car just flipped. There was literally nothing there. They were driving straight on an empty highway, and the car just completely flipped over. My Uncle Steve actually died that day, but my mum survived, and this made my grandpa quit acting and move back with my grandpa. My grandma and grandpa decided to settle down in the Midwest and bought a pleasantly large house with my grandpa's pharmacist income. Things didn't get better after this, though. The house was constantly burdened with strange figures, things going missing, dogs being scared by seemingly nothing, and even the piano playing by itself. But that wasn't even the worst part. One night, my grandma invited some friends over, and as a joke, one of the girls tried a wedding dress on. It actually fit just fine, and as they were making jokes, it suddenly just began constricting. My grandma told me that you could basically see the stitches contracting, getting smaller and smaller around her friend, until her friend just couldn't breathe or move, unlike before when things were fine. My grandma got a pair of scissors and cut the dress off of her, and when the dress fell to her ankles, it flew to the other side of the room, tripping her friend. They managed to grab the dress together and took it down to the fire pit, burning it to ashes. And then my family would just go on to experience even more unexplainable atrocities. Family members just suddenly experiencing depression, suicide, dying from unexplainable causes, and the same figures, things going missing, everything just like before. My dad ended up dying a couple of years ago, and it was strange how I watched him go from just a completely normal good dad to an alcoholic and then just dead. It was like something was just feeding him the alcohol and destroying him from within. Now that I live on my own with my fiancé, I do still see things. I see shadow figures nearly every day, usually several times a day. I've heard people talking to me before while I was home alone, and have had things mess with my animals too. I have 3 parrots, and they seem to pick up words and noises and songs that I don't say around them. They are also horrified of the dark, which is strange because 2 of the parrots are my fiancé's, and they've never had this fear up until living with me. And I guess that I'm pretty afraid for the future, and so is my fiancé. My fiancé had never had paranormal experiences up until being with me, and it strained our relationship a couple of times for sure. I'll send you guys some updates and probably get to posting some other old stories that I have too, but for now, thanks for listening. My experience took place when I was no older than 4 or 5 years old, trying to take a nap in my bedroom on the 2nd story of our apartment building. The only way that I can describe what happened is that shortly after I laid down, I witnessed something lightweight and small being chucked at me from across the room, coming from near my toy box. My toy box was on a wall with no window, and my bedroom door was to the left of it. I picked up the thing that landed on my bedspread and thought, at least in my 4-year-old mind, that it looked a lot like a dried orange peel. The more years that pass, I realize it could have been something else, but I have no idea what. Super confused and not scared at first, I ran out to the hallway expecting my stepdad to have been out there playing a joke on me. But that was the only explanation that I could think of at the time. Maybe he had flicked it from under the door or something, but he was across the apartment and was surprised to see that I was awake and chided me for getting up when I was supposed to be sleeping. When he took me back to my room, the peel was nowhere to be found, and he thought that I was lying to get out of my nap. Somewhat nervously, I climbed back into bed and laid awake for about maybe 5 or 10 minutes before I felt another tap of another peel hitting my bedspread. Scared at this point, I remember looking at my window and making sure it was shut. Meanwhile, another one flew out of nowhere and hit my skin. I remember diving under the covers and seeing the silhouettes of them landing on the blanket near my face, and when they stopped, there was nothing on my bed. When my mum came home from work, I told her everything that happened, and both of my parents laughed at me and tried to convince me that it must have been a dream. Sometime later, maybe a couple of days or weeks, they go by and I was sitting on my bedroom floor playing quietly when I discover the same kind of dried orange peel thing in the bottom of my toy box in a corner. I grabbed it and immediately ran to show my mum, who was completely taken aback, but after she composed herself, she just threw it away and told me that it was nothing. For the years that we stayed in that apartment, I would occasionally find the orange peels on different parts of the carpet, in drawers, just all over the place, and yes, my room was cleaned and I wasn't allowed to eat in there, so it was weird. Anyways, I know that this is a super weird and random experience, but I was curious to hear any thoughts that you guys might have. The only thing that I've been able to find out online is that orange peels can be burned to ward off demons, but at this point, I don't remember exactly what it looked like, and my mum claims to not remember too. Also, our apartment was in Salem, Oregon, on a massive Native American burial site too. I know that a lot of Salem is an Indian burial ground, but this part of Salem is especially known for it. And this is the only paranormal experience that I'm taking to my grave swearing by. After my mum laughed off what I had told her, I remember telling myself for years that Jesus will tell them that you weren't lying in heaven someday, which was kind of my way of getting back at them at the time. Anyways, sorry for the long story, and I know it's not that exciting as the other experiences on here, but it was a weird one, and I just thought I would share it with you guys. I've had sleep paralysis before. My older sister is convinced that it was just that, but I have a deep feeling that it wasn't. To begin, I live in Colorado, just outside of Denver, in the metro area in a nicely populated neighborhood, right off of a major highway. I literally live one street away from the highway, and as a kid, I was convinced for some reason that I was an alien or some sort of alien experiment, and I genuinely have no idea where this thought came from. I'd assumed, of course, that it was just kid silliness. I'd probably watched Escape to Witch Mountain or E.T. too many times or something. Either way, I haven't thought about aliens in a long time, and I was starting to doubt that they actively visit our planet. Anyways, here's what happened. So in the middle of dreaming, I woke up suddenly to a feeling of alertness and dread. This intense feeling of terror came over me, and I felt an immediate urge to run, scream, and cry. But I had a very strong feeling that I should stay still and not move at all as well. I was going to get out of bed, but the instinct not to move was just too strong to ignore, so I just stayed there. And then there was a white square light hovering above me. It was about 3 feet inside and made up of smaller lights arranged in a square formation. There was a strange humming emanating from it, and I realized that I couldn't hear my fan or the cars on the highway like I usually can. The terror came full force at this realization, and I wanted so badly to run and scream, but the instinct that I needed to be quiet and stay there was too strong to ignore again. I wanted so badly to get up, but I knew that I just shouldn't. Despite my terror, I didn't even allow myself to cry, and I started quietly whispering, "I want to stay with my mum. I'm going to stay with my mum." And then the humming stopped. My fan started whirring again, and the light was just gone. Immediately after that, I felt very, very sleepy, and I could feel that I was forgetting what had just happened. But I decided that I wasn't going to let myself forget, and I went and turned the light on and started crying for a long time. My older sister ended up calling me and tried to convince me that it was my anxiety and I was having sleep paralysis, but this just didn't really feel like it. I knew in my mind that I could move. I just had a feeling that I shouldn't move. Like I said too, I've had sleep paralysis before, and I know how to fight it and deal with it calmly. I feel crazy even talking about it. I feel so crazy, but something definitely happened to me, and thinking about it, I feel like this happened before because I wanted to forget, and this time I wish that I had forgotten again in some ways. If anyone can relate to this experience, please let me know in the comments below. I'm honest to God hoping that this was just sleep paralysis, but I feel so strongly that it just wasn't. This happened around 8 or 9 years ago. I was in a mall with my daughter and, as a weekend treat, decided to go to a local cake store to sample a slice of their chocolate mousse. A few minutes after getting seated, my phone rang. It said that my sister was calling. She was at work at the time and was not allowed phones in the production area, so I was concerned that it may be important. When I picked up and said hello, a really creepy and kind of oily voice that I didn't recognize said, "Oh, so you're just here eating cake, are you?" I think I may have said a few other things, asked the name, why they were calling, something like that, and the voice just laughed and laughed. It was difficult to identify as male or female as well, and all I know is that it was really wrong, like the voice was distorted or something. I looked around and I remember thinking that I was probably a victim of one of those gag shows or something, but then again, why go through all the effort of using my sister's name and number just for a prank call? I eventually hung up and looked at my daughter. She was still eating cake, but the people around us were minding their own business and the world just stayed the same. I eventually told my sister after, and she had no idea what I was talking about. There was no call log on her phone that showed that she dialed me, and I don't remember if it showed on mine, but it was a long time ago, and I still have no idea what happened. G'day mates, it's Busta here. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you would like to help me out, then please go ahead and watch another video by clicking on a card on the screen. As always guys, thanks for all the love and support, and I'll see you mates in the next one.